Hey guys, welcome back to the Sports Lounge. Pat Phelan with you. Had a chance to sit down with Cory Spires a few weeks back. We talked about the 2018 NFL Draft for the Carolina Panthers, some of our likes, some of our dislikes, and just an overall breakdown of each of the picks. We're going to try to continue to pick this back up throughout the season, try to get some guests lined up as well. So stick with us. We'll try to get in more of a regular schedule here throughout the season. We'll try to break down each week what happens with the Carolina Panthers on and off the field. So without further ado, here is episode 9 of the Sports Lounge as I sat down with Cory Spires. Back here with another Sports Lounge. Pat Phelan, Cory Spires with you. This time, breaking down the Panthers 2018 NFL Draft. We're about a week removed from that. Panthers, all in all, had a pretty decent draft, addressed some of the needs early on in days 1 and 2. And we'll break down each pick here as we go along. But Cory, we'll talk about the first round pick for the Carolina Panthers. Panthers had the number 24th pick in the first round. They select DJ Moore, wide receiver out of Maryland. A lot of people were kind of upset about the pick. They thought it was going to go in a different direction, but I thought DJ Moore was the right pick at that time. There was no wide receiver really blowing us out of the water in the first round. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought there was a chance we'd go Calvin Ridley, and I was a well-documented Calvin Ridley fan. But I think the difference between DJ and Calvin, and the Panthers ended up saying this too, is that I think Ridley might be the more polished day one player in terms of his route running and in terms of his overall pro readiness and how he'll fit into an offense, whereas Moore is the more explosively capable playmaker, yards after the catch guy. And so in that sense, I think he will make a lot of sense for us because a lot of people have compared him to a young Steve Smith and in the way he works with the ball and the way he finds open space. And the one knock on him that I've seen is he's not an especially crisp route runner, and a lot of his yards have kind of come after the catch and on really simple routes. But his college production, I think, speaks for itself. I mean, it's a guy that is fresh off of being named Big Ten Receiver of the Year in a year where he caught passes from 4 different quarterbacks for a not very great Maryland team. So I think that speaks for itself.
DJ Moore, 6 foot, 210, did run a 4.42 at the combine. And Steve Smith talked about it. I think a lot of Panthers fans were nervous until they heard Steve Smith after the pick saying that he can run every single route on the route tree, and they've never been able to replace me until today. And I think that kind of got fans pretty jacked up knowing that you got a guy coming in who's going to be a speedy guy, can do different things. And like you said, I think I read somewhere earlier this afternoon that they believe he's going to be top 5 in yards after catch this season. So just something to look forward to in what will be Norv Turner's first season here with Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, it definitely gives him a shiny new weapon to work with. And on the Steve Smith comparisons, I mean, stature-wise, it makes sense. DJ Moore's a little bit taller than Steve was. They have him perhaps generously listed at 5'9", Steve Smith, that is, and around 200 pounds. DJ Moore, like you said, about 6 foot, 5'11", depending on what site you look at, and about 215. So he's a little stockier and a little taller than Steve Smith was, but the style that they play with is similar. And I actually went back and looked at Steve Smith's combine numbers because I was curious, and Steve Smith ran a 4.39 40, so barely edged Moore, who ran a 4.42. But Steve Smith's vertical was 38.5, Moore's was 39.5. So pretty comparable combine numbers. Moore had a little bit better vertical and was a little slower. But yeah, it's a toss-up. I mean, the thing that jumps out to me, like I said, is all the different receivers. I mean, he set a school record with 80 receptions. You don't have to do that by accident. He had 8 quarterbacks in his college career. So, I mean, he's shown that he can thrive in a situation that isn't necessarily stable. And I think he enters a situation in Carolina where things are pretty stable. You have a franchise quarterback in place. You have a room of receivers that he can learn from. And you have a reasonably set offensive line and some capable running backs already in place. So he enters a pretty stable situation. And another thing that jumps out to me is he progressively got better each year at Maryland. Goes from 25 receptions to 41 to 80. His yards go from 357 to 637 to 1,033. Touchdowns, 3, 6, 8. So that shows me a guy that is progressively learning the game as he grows, and that's, I think, encouraging.
Yeah, it's going to be a great addition to what already has been a pretty exciting Panthers offense. As everyone knows, dumped Kelvin Benjamin last year, so Devin Funchess is really the main guy. But during the offseason, brought in Torrey Smith from the Eagles in a trade. So you'll have a guy, Torrey Smith, 6 foot 205, to go along with DJ Moore. And of course, just signed Greg Olsen again to a new contract. And Christian McCaffrey will be out of the backfield primarily, I think, as well. So I think Cam Newton's going to have a lot of different weapons to work with. And I think it's going to be a lot faster offense than what we had in so-called the Twin Towers with Kelvin Benjamin and Devin Funchess.
Yeah, it's a different look for sure. And I think DJ Moore will get his chances. But, I mean, remember that even Steve Smith didn't light the world on fire as a receiver when he was a rookie here. He did return his first touch. I think it was a kickoff or a punt. Remember, he returned it for a touchdown. Mm-hmm. But in terms of receiving, he had 160 yards. So that's the situation that DJ Moore enters in is one where he's not asked to be a 1,000-yard guy immediately. If he is, then great. But he doesn't have to be with all the guys around him. It does make for a very crowded wide receiver room now, though, because, I mean, you have to factor in that there's guys like Fred Ross, the undrafted free agent from last year, a guy that I was extremely excited about. Guys like Austin Duke that are all going to be vying for spots, too. So it's going to be a crazy competitive training camp among receivers. Not to say that DJ Moore is not going to make the team. I mean, that's ridiculous. But he will have to certainly prove his worth and fight for playing time, especially early. So that'll hopefully help him out from a compete level standpoint.
Yeah, and hopefully we don't get as excited as we did last year with the whole Christian McCaffrey train, just because I think Panther fans they got a little too excited because of what everyone was saying. No one can cover him one-on-one and all this stuff. And I think we need to temper our expectations just a little bit, just because he is a 6-foot guy coming into a new offense, rookie year. I don't expect him, like you said, to light the world on fire. But if he can give us, 3 or 4 touchdowns, that'd be great. I think that'd be a great season for the rookie.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I don't think it would shock anybody. It wouldn't shock me if Calvin Ridley actually had the better rookie season, because I think he enters a situation where that's a really explosive offense in Atlanta, good quarterback, and another solid wide receiver to play next to in Julio Jones. I think he's a little more pro-ready, like I said earlier. So would it shock me if he's the better rookie, but not the better player eventually? Not really. I think the Falcons got a really good one too. But, I mean, some people had Ridley over Moore in the wide receiver rankings, and some had Moore way over Ridley. So time will tell, but I think Moore will be the better player eventually. He might have, I don't know, I say more of a learning curve, but I feel like his style of play is going to fit in really well. So we'll see how he does.
We'll switch gears here to the second pick the Panthers had. This was in the second round, number 55 overall. This might be my favorite pick of the draft for the Panthers. At 55, they selected Dante Jackson from LSU to get some help in the secondary. And Dante Jackson was the fastest guy at the combine, ran a 4.3. But I think this is a pick that was much needed. We all know Marty Hernandez struggled in day 2 and day 3 of the NFL draft, and I think he got things started on the right foot here by picking Dante Jackson.
Yeah, Dante Jackson was a pick that, honestly, when we made it, I hadn't looked into too many members of the secondary outside of Josh Jackson and Justin Reed. So when I saw the pick come across, I had to go do a little research as to who it was. But I remember seeing Dante Jackson play for LSU, and it's a good pick. I mean, like you said, it's a guy that brings pure sprinter-level track speed to the secondary. And in a division that features 2 turf teams that play very good offensive ball, in the Falcons and Saints, you need all the speed you can get. And there's a lot of talented wide receivers, not only in the NFC South, but in the NFC, that have given us fits over the years. And Dante Jackson adds that right amount of speed that he can go stride for stride with any of these top flight guys. So I think it not only filled a need, but also brings a versatile guy into the secondary. And I think that's kind of the biggest question mark. They list him as a corner, but I've heard some people say that he's a Tyrann Mathieu-esque guy who could potentially play safety. I've seen people talk about him being in the nickel corner spot, which might be fine too, but I think it kind of gives you a really fast Swiss Army knife of a guy that you can kind of plug and play in the secondary.
Yeah, and I'm kind of hoping he can be a Patrick Peterson type of guy where if we need him to return a punt or maybe return some kickoffs. He's got that speed if we want to use him in a different way. I think that'd be cool as well, just because I hate using, a Christian McCaffrey back there and risk injury, because punt returns and kick returns can be sometimes the most dangerous. But to have him back there is really exciting. And, we lost Worley here in the offseason, which personally I think is okay. I think he was not that great in his second year. So to have a guy like Dante Jackson come in, because we're going to have to guard Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones now twice a year. So I think he just gives us that second edge that we can get in the secondary.
Yeah, and he has to play with that edge, because one of the biggest question marks about his game is his size. He's 5'10", 178 is what they have him listed at. I would assume that 178 will almost undoubtedly go up at some point as he progresses through pro-style workouts. But still, 5'10", call him 185, 190, that's still pretty light if you're going to play safety. So, but they asked him about that. I think there was an article on, I want to say it was Panthers.com, where they asked him about his size, and I think it was like a scouting website, or it was a video, and they asked him about his size and his durability concerns, and I believe he said he never missed a game for LSU. I'd have to check that, but
yeah, I believe so.
I think that's what he said. And then he said, if there's any questions about my size, just look at the fact that I never missed a game in the SEC, which, when you think about it, that is pretty impressive, because as we know, that's a hard-hitting conference. And so for him to go through that at his size uninjured is pretty impressive. And then as I was watching film and kind of learning more about him, the one game that really stuck out to me was when I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it Auburn that played LSU, and they went after him like 5 times in the last 2 minutes?
Yeah.
And the kid made some ridiculous plays on the ball. So that speed alone, you can't teach that, obviously. So I feel like with the chip on his shoulder that he plays with because of his size, he's willing to kind of learn positions, and I feel like he'll certainly compete for some starting position at somewhere in our secondary. I don't know exactly where that will be, but he could be one of those guys, kind of depending on the down, depending on the distance, he plays safety or he plays nickel corner, kind of like we've used Colin Jones in the past, just sort of wherever he fits. So I feel like it's a really good pick that not only addressed the kind of shallow secondary that we have, but it added some speed and added a playmaker on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and I was looking at some videos earlier, a game against Arkansas where, they had him blitz off the corner, and his hit was just really violent on the quarterback, so that got me excited too. And I think one of the strong things is he reads the ball so well, and his breaks on the ball, being able to play it, not because he knows where the wide receiver is at all times, and he can still focus on the ball and make a play. I think that's what really stood out to me from him. So, I'm pretty excited about the pick.
Yeah, and he'll join the Panthers' third-round pick in the secondary there, which is another game that initially I wasn't too sure about, but the more I get into, the more I like the pick, and that's Tennessee's Rashawn Golden. What are your thoughts on the third-round pick?
Yeah, I didn't know too much about him. I didn't watch a lot of Tennessee from this past season, but reading up on him, I heard he's kind of a Swiss Army knife as well. He can play multiple positions. I read that they want to use him, I think right now, mostly as a safety, if I'm not mistaken. I heard he's a really fast guy as well, another one of those guys that maybe can be used to return the ball as well. But, yeah, I'm excited. If we need some help in the secondary bad, and the one thing that Marty addressed was we need to get younger back there as well. I think people were kind of upset taking 2 corners back to back, but if you can use him in that safety spot, I think it can be really crucial.
Yeah, I think the back-to-back corner proves kind of what Marty Herney, what was his mantra leading up to the draft, which was they have a board and they're not going to reach for guys based on need. We didn't necessarily need back-to-back DBs, but they were high on their board, and they got their 2 guys back-to-back. So apparently it represented the best pick available. But, yeah, Golden, his one claim to infamy was flipping off the Bama student section, obviously. So that was kind of how he got his attention. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, he's a solid player, and I've been watching a lot on him and reading a lot on him. And like you said, he's a versatile guy. They played him at nickel corner. They played him at safety. They played him at outside corner. He's a little bit bigger than Dante Jackson. He's 6'1", 197, so closer to that prototypical safety size. Not quite as fast as Dante. Mm-hmm. He ran a 4.61, but he was Tennessee's number 1 highest graded defensive player by Pro Football Focus last year. And I was watching part of a telecast where they might have been playing Bama, I guess it was, and he made a play, and I think it was Kirk Herbstreit. He said who was the one. Someone asked me who the guy on Tennessee was that could start for Bama immediately, and it's this guy, Rashawn Goldman. So apparently they thought he could have started anywhere in the nation, pretty much. And the more I watch on him, the more he's a solid guy. Like you said, he hits pretty hard. He has reasonably good coverage skills. Don't think he sets the world on fire speed-wise when compared to Dante, but he's still fast enough to hang with most of those top flight guys. So wherever we put him, I think Golden will fit in pretty well because he was consistently one of Tennessee's best defensive players last year. So I think it was kind of a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's played 3 different positions, safety, nickelback, and cornerback, which I think that helps us out a lot because if we know anything from last year, we kind of got decimated in the backfield multiple times, and we were having to play guys like Shaq, covering some of the fastest receivers in the NFL, which is not ideal. So to be able to have him is really good. He had a breakout season last year, 65 tackles, 3 forced fumbles. He recovered all 3 of them, had a pick, and 6 passes defended. So, I mean, I'm really excited about this guy. I mean, again, I'm still learning a lot about him, but I just think the potential, the ceiling is really high on this guy, and I think it was kind of a steal at 85, but I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, he put up, like you just read the stat line, it's a solid stat line, and more than anything of it being a solid stat line, I think it tells the story of a guy who's kind of everywhere. I mean, that's a good number of tackles for a DB, and he has some interceptions, he has forced fumbles, he's recovering fumbles, so it tells the story to me of a guy who's always on the play, has good football instincts, and that's the kind of thing that you can't teach to a DB. So I think, like you said, it was a good value pick, I think. Some of the mocks and stuff that I read had him going much later, but, I mean, the Panthers have their big board for a reason, and he was the guy they wanted, and they got their guy. So I don't mind the pick, and I think he'll fit in well, especially with the situation we have at DB as it stands. I think he'll have a real serious chance to rise up the depth chart in the preseason.
What happened next was kind of interesting. Panthers had the chance to have pick 85 and 88, but at 88 they traded it to Green Bay for picks 101 and 147 later on the next day. So Friday the only pick was Golden, and then we move on to the next day, had the first pick of the 3rd round. And it was an interesting one, but the more and more I think about it, I think it was probably a pretty solid pick, and that's Ian Thomas, the tight end out of Indiana.
Yeah, it kind of took me by surprise that we opened up the day on Saturday by going with him, and it was a guy that I honestly didn't know much about, and I don't think many people knew much about him either because he was a 2-year junior college guy, was he not?
Mm-hmm,
and then he transfers to Indiana and had a pretty solid season in Indiana, but I mean, he wasn't lighting the world on fire, but what gets people excited about him is the potential. And yeah, I mean, with Indiana, 13 games played, 3 catches for 28 yards. That was his junior season. So he was a solid junior college tight end, and then he goes to Indiana. Small fish in a big sea, but a lot of people like his size. I mean, he's 6'4", 259, so he has that prototypical tight end size. And when you watch him play, it's not flashy, but apparently he's already a very good pro-level, pro-ready blocker, which certainly helps his chances of seeing the field early.
Absolutely.
And when you watch him, he has good hands. He runs solid routes. His speed's not setting the world on fire. I mean, I think he ran a 4.7 footer, but for a tight end and a guy as big as that, that's not a problem. I mean, Greg Olson's not the fastest guy in the world either. So yeah, I mean, I see Ian Thomas as a value pick on day 3, a guy that, best case scenario, lives up to his potential, learns under Greg Olson, and ends up being a staple at some point.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, his ceiling is high, but again, he's really raw. So signing Greg for 2 more years is definitely going to help Ian Thomas learn behind one of the best tight ends in the NFL right now, maybe all time. His routes are obviously not the best, but he didn't get a lot of reps. That's just what he needs. Like you said, he's a great blocker from what we've seen, but he didn't get to play that much at Indiana. And so I think that is kind of just a little bit of a weakness. I mean, it's no fault of him. They just didn't play him that much. They already had someone else. He just doesn't run many routes, so he'll need to learn that. just looking at some other things, one scout said he leaves yardage on the field with his overwhelming desire to punish rather than elude after the catch.
And I mean, I think that's a tight end's sort of instinct to want to go through guys rather than dance around them or something. But I mean, that can be corrected. The one thing that Ian Thomas people always talk about is obviously his parents died when he was like 9.
Right.
Raised by his brother. So, I mean, if you buy into those intangibles, the character, the perseverance, and all that, for what all that's worth, I'm not sure. But there's something to that, perhaps. He's a guy that has motivation. He is a high character guy. Didn't grow up with a silver spoon in his mouth by any standard. So, if I had to take a guess, I guess he'd come into camp hungry and ready to prove himself, especially after, if it were me, I'd be happy to be drafted, but I wouldn't want to be an 83 guy. So
Right.
hopefully he comes into camp hungry and looking to make a statement, show people that the Panthers made the right choice. But yeah, it's a position of need after Ed Dixon bolts for Seattle. Obviously, the only other tight end on the roster with any Panthers experience is Chris Manhertz. A fine guy, but he's just another guy.
Right.
And he could be a third guy, or he might be a cut casualty if Ian Thomas plays well. But it's a good situation for Thomas because he can come in, compete for that number 2 job, and like you said, see the field probably a good bit if he can block. He can come in on those jumbo packages and soak up all the knowledge from 88. So it's not a bad deal.
We'll switch back to the other side of the ball here for the next pick for the Panthers. Pick 136. This one I didn't know too much about, but after reading it, I did get a little bit excited depending on how we use him. That's Marquise Haynes. Listed as defensive end from Ole Miss, but when he was drafted, sounds like we may try to use him as an outside linebacker. He's 6'2", 235, ran a 4.67, vertical jump 32, the 3-cone drill 7.14. As a freshman, went to Ole Miss. He was a freshman All-American, SEC All-Freshman as well. Starting 4 of the 13 games, 31 tackles, 9 for loss, 7.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. He originally signed with North Carolina after high school, but he chose to go a different route. But the more kind of surprising bit, he did break old Greg Hardy's sack record at Ole Miss, and he posted 47.5 tackles for loss, which is a record as well.
Yeah, I mean, you don't set your school's record for sacks at any school at any level of the game by accident. I mean, that shows a guy who does have consistent pass rush ability. The one thing that I saw from him, the more kind of tape I watch on him, is there's times when he does go a little bit quiet, gets taken out of the pass rush equation. His move set might be a little limited, but when he does use his speed to rush, which I think seems to be his biggest thing, he's not a guy that's going to come in and shove guys out of the way necessarily. He's more of a speed rush guy. And like you said, sometimes he has his hand in the dirt, sometimes he doesn't. But when he does use that speed, he does have the ability to get into the backfield. And he's shown that. And when he hits, he usually hits pretty hard. I mean, he has a few forced fumbles every season. So that's always solid. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how we use him. Because, I mean, at 6'2", 235, he's a little bit undersized for where you'd like to see him as a D-end. I mean, you look at Charles Johnson, longtime Panther pass rusher. He was 6'2" as well, but he was also 278. So
right.
He was, a good 50 pounds heavier than Marquise Haynes. So you'd probably like to see Haynes gain a little more muscle, and we'll see how we end up using him. I mean, I read an article talking about how we might use him as a joker, kind of a guy that can drop back in pass coverage as a linebacker, but he can put his hand in the dirt on passing downs. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what he brings to the pass rush, because I think that he could sort of be a proverbial Swiss Army knife for us. And, 4th round, it's worth the gamble, I think.
Yeah, because just reading some things about him, they say one of his weaknesses is he has a body type of a big safety and not a reliable edge setter. So I'm wondering if they might try to use him as maybe a Colin Jones type of person, playing as outside linebacker. But if you need to run a scheme where it looks like he's blitzing or maybe just playing as that outside linebacker but then drops back into coverage to cover somebody, I'm wondering if he's able to do that, or if they want him just to gain a whole bunch of weight and then he plays D-tackle like he was listed.
Yeah, we'll see. The one thing I'd worry about with him gaining weight is that he'd lose some of his speed, because that's, I think, the one thing that's kind of made him an effective pass rusher for Ole Miss. But
right.
But yeah, I mean, it's a tough position to break into for the Panthers because pass rusher, obviously you've got Julius, who can't play forever. And you've got Mario Addison, who's no spring chicken, but behind him you got guys like Deshaun Hall and Wes Horton, solid guys that have good pass rushing abilities. So I mean, he's going to have to really make a statement early that he can get to the quarterback, and I could see him being used as a passing down rusher, kind of get an extra fast body in there. But if they're thinking he's going to be sort of a joker, he also has to leapfrog a bunch of capable linebackers. So it's going to be tough for Marquise Haynes, but not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be an uphill climb. But if he does make the team and he does stick around, he brings that kind of situational speed pass rusher thing to the defense. And I don't think that's the worst thing in the world.
We'll go with the next pick for the Panthers here, number 161 overall. And this is where I started to get kind of upset with Marty Herney. Didn't really like how he finished the rest of the draft. But anyway, pick 161, Jermaine Carter, linebacker out of Maryland, 6 foot, 228. He was a captain the last 2 years for the Terps, including his senior season when he was Defensive Player of the Year and honorable mention All Big Ten. Had 90 tackles, 3.5 sacks, and a conference high 4 fumbles.
Yeah, Jermaine Carter is probably the one prospect we drafted I know the very least about. I have to be honest, but I know that there were questions about his size and his linebacker instincts. The one thing that I do like about him, like you said, is the fact that he was a captain. He has leadership skills. He was a solid special teams guy at Maryland, apparently, early in his career. And I think I would have to say that's probably how he's going to have to make his start, similar to how guys like A.J. Klein and Ben Jacobs and Jared Norris, these linebackers who have kind of been fringe guys for the Panthers, but they stuck around solely because of that special teams ability. And now they're in a position where they're seeing reps behind Luke, behind Thomas Davis. I think that's going to have to be kind of how he carves his name in here because, I mean, he's 6 foot, 228. I mean, you look at him, at least I look at him, and I say, okay, cool. He looks like Jeremy Cash did last year coming out of Duke.
Yeah.
Kind of an undersized guy.
Right.
Perhaps good tackling ability. I don't know. But, yeah, he's going to have to be a good special teams player and be willing to be a gunner because I think that's how he's going to have to make his fame, at least early on in Carolina because, as we talked about, previously on even this show, there's a lot of talented linebackers in the Panthers locker room. So I was a little bit confused about that one as well, but I'm trusting the process here with Marty Herney. I just don't know where Jermaine Carter fits into the equation at this moment exactly.
Yeah, and just looking at some of the weaknesses that different scouts had on him, too many missed or broken tackles in 2017. Play speed on tape appears to be slower than posted speed. May lack the juice to handle a move to outside linebacker. Slow starts on pursuit put him in more challenging tackle situations, and below average quickness to diagnose and respond to counters and play action. So that kind of makes me a little nervous, just looking at the tape and reading what these scouts have said about him. So I think you're right. Like you said, he's going to have to start on special teams and see what he can give us. Of course, if he makes the roster, great. That'd be great. Special teams guy, but if not, he's going to have to work on that tackling a little bit. He is fast. That is the one thing. 4.69 40. So that helps him out a little bit, and just kind of nervous just looking at some of his weaknesses to start.
But speaking of linebacker, I think the Panthers got the better of the two linebackers if we're comparing them in UNC's Andre Smith. I actually really liked that pick. He's a guy that I knew a tiny bit about, kind of casually following UNC football, and a guy that has a ton of talent at the linebacker position, but has just sort of had a hard time staying healthy. Yeah,
and that's the thing. That's what bit Carolina a lot last year was the injury bug. But Andre Smith, 6 foot, 237, ran a 4.63. He's a great tackler. He's really quick off the block as well. Sounds like he's good as far as Luke Kuechly, getting the defense lined up where they need to be and shifting from gap to gap to kind of handle the runner. But the one thing is he's coming off a knee injury. So that's what kind of scares me a little bit. A season-ending knee injury, that's never good. But we'll have to see. Like you, I kind of kept up with Carolina, not as much as I have in the past. But he appeared 14 games as a reserve, 53 tackles, 2 for loss, 1 interception, and 1 forced fumble. Again, he was a top 20 inside linebacker recruit out of Florida when coming to UNC.
Yeah, and he had a great 2016, 113 tackles, 6 for a loss, broke up 3 passes, and then obviously he has the knee injury after a great start to 2017. I mean, those first 2 weeks, 21 tackles and a pick, and actually he played, I think it was like half of that Louisville game with the torn, wasn't a meniscus, was it? Maybe it was a meniscus.
I think so, yeah.
Something in his knee that he tore, and he played most of that Louisville game with that. And then actually it was before the week 3 matchup that they sidelined for the season. So playing on one leg that second week, still finished the first 2 games with 21 tackles and a pick. So, I mean, he does certainly have that talent and that those natural linebacker instincts. But obviously the injury bug is what's been him. If he can stay healthy, I mean, certainly there's no better place to learn the linebacker position than from these guys on the Panthers. But on the same token, like we've said a few times already in this show, it's a tough place to break in at linebacker. It kind of reminds me of when we got Jeremy Cash from Duke last season as an undrafted guy. I was actually super excited about him. Played safety at Duke, and we're thinking, oh, this guy's going to be a depth linebacker for us. I mean, he didn't even make the team. So it's I hope that doesn't happen with Smith, because I think he does have a lot of natural ability, but we'll see if he can stay healthy.
All right, so the last pick for the Panthers in the 2018 NFL Draft, 242 overall. That's Kendrick Norton, the D tackle out of Miami. Pretty great lineage for Norton. He's the grandson of the great Ken Norton Sr., who was a heavyweight boxing champion, and former NFL player, 2-time Super Bowl winner Ken Norton Jr. as well. So he's got it in his blood that he's going to be a great NFL guy. Just some of his numbers overall: the 4-star recruit, Under Armour All-American from Jacksonville, played in 12 games as a true freshman 2015, had 19 tackles and a sack. And just looking at some other numbers as well, he was honorable mention All-ACC in 2017, played in all 13 games, starting 12 in his junior year, 26 tackles, 6.5 for loss, 2 sacks as well. So, again, another guy who's proven in a conference, but we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about the Norton pick. I mean, everything that I've read about him kind of says don't expect too much of a pass rusher. I mean, he's not going to come in here and be K1 Short or anything like that, or Chris Jenkins. He's going to be a run-plugging sort of space eater, much like Dontari Poe is, really, although Dontari Poe does have a little bit of a pass rush ability. So, I mean, I don't think we should expect Norton to come in here and have even 4 or 5 sacks. He'll probably be one of those sort of running down space eaters that can go in there with Dontari Poe and eat up the space. I mean, he's a big dude, obviously. They have him listed 6'3", 314. I'd expect that 314 to go up a bit. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to come in here and be a run plugger. And it's kind of, I guess it makes sense with Starlet walking, although we did replace them with Dontari Poe. I guess he fits in behind, you figured K1 Short will get spelled by Vernon Butler, and Dontari Poe can get spelled by Norton. Or actually, Norton and Poe could probably be the running down guys. But it wasn't necessarily a position of need, I didn't think. But it's an interesting pick, one that I don't know a ton about. But like you said, he has a lineage of athleticism in his family. So with a 7th round pick, I think it's a fine chance to take.
Yeah, just some of the things the scout has said, some of the negative things. He's kind of sluggish, and he's kind of limited in what plays he can make. His ankles are tight, knees lack bend. But what one AFC scout said, he's good at what they ask him to do. You know, he's not a sexy pick, but he can end up playing early because he can eat up blocks. And I think that's the thing. With his size, even if he gains a few more pounds, he's just another big body in what is already a great run-stopping defense. And I think he can contribute right away, a good sub for guys like Poe and KK. So, I mean, it's not maybe the greatest pick, not the worst pick, but it's a 7th round pick. I think it's not one that most of us wanted to see, but it's something depth-wise while losing Star that we needed to do.
Yeah, it's certainly not flashy, but like you said, it makes sense. I mean, with Star leaving, obviously we took I think small step forward, replacing him with Dontari Poe, but still, it's a position that depth could never hurt. I mean, we saw Vernon Butler go down a couple times last year with injury. If that happens again, Norton's a guy that could step up and kind of be next man up, or heaven forbid something happened to Poe, something happened to K1. All of a sudden, those guys get bumped up one, and I think with Norton's size and his run plugging ability, you wouldn't hate having that guy as a second stringer. I like it as a depth pickup. I really do.
So that's going to do it for the 2018 draft for the Panthers. The one thing that I was kind of upset about is we didn't really address the need of offensive linemen. It wasn't the greatest last year. We had the big Khalil signing that really we were both excited for. We said it here on this podcast. We thought it was going to be a great pick, but turned out not to be so hot of a pick. That's the one thing I really wish we would have tried to take a stab at, was offensive line and maybe a running back as well, now that the Panthers did cut longtime running back and franchise leader in yards, Jonathan Stewart.
Yeah, I thought at some point in the draft we'd address offensive line and running back, and I was shocked that we didn't. Although Panthers obviously did address those needs with undrafted guys, looking for that next Andrew Norwell diamond in the rough. Hearns of Clemson was actually a guy that in a couple of mock simulated drafts that I had us getting. I don't hate Hearns. I think he's raw, but he's a guy that could come in here and provide some guard depth. Obviously, we get Reggie Bonathan from Louisville, which is an interesting one because he was a quarterback, he was a wide receiver, he was a running back. So can he come in here and make the team as a running back? I don't know. I mean, right now you look at the depth chart, you got Christian McCaffrey, you got Fozzie Whitaker, and Cameron Artis-Payne, I think, might be the number one wild card for the Panthers offense next year. Is he going to make the team? Is he going to take that next step? Because, I mean, for the past 2 or 3 years, you and me both have been Cameron Artis-Payne fans. But if he's out, is Reggie Bonathan in? So, I don't know. Yeah, those were 2 positions I, like you, thought we might address in the draft. But I guess the board fell the way it did. And we did see a large run on offensive linemen in the first and second round. So I guess maybe the guys that we liked were off the board early.
Yeah, that could have been it as well. And like you said, we addressed it in the undrafted free agents. We also got Kyle Bosch, offensive lineman from West Virginia, Brendan Manning from Penn State. So we got a couple guys. We also took Kyle Allen, quarterback from Houston. That was an interesting pickup as well. We'll see if he makes the roster. But again, just a little things that I wish we would have addressed, maybe more so than going defense heavy, but we'll see. So that's going to wrap it up for episode 9 of the Sports Lounge. Again, thanks to Cory Spires for taking some time with me to talk about the 2018 NFL Draft for the Carolina Panthers. We'll try to get this maybe once a week, once every other week throughout the offseason. And then once preseason starts up for the Carolina Panthers, we'll try to get an episode out each week. Again, we'll try to get some guests lined up as well throughout the season. We'll talk Carolina Panthers, may throw an App State in there as well, and even some North Carolina Tar Heels. So stick with us. We're going to get this going weekly once again, and that has been episode 9 of the Sports Lounge.